How fast is your website? It's a key metric, not just for SEO, but also for Google Ads and even for social media. When a customer comes to your website, you want it to load fast. So in this video, let me show you some cool tools that'll help you investigate just how fast your website actually is. Let's get started. So the first test I would emphasize, and I think this is me speaking as a marketer, is the ultimate test, which is the user experience. So I'm not so concerned about a website that maybe fails one of the metrics if in general the users are not complaining and if in general it passes my spot tests. So check your website all the time just as a user. It's not the best test. I know it's not a scientific test, but I do want you to do that. Now, there are some tips on how to do this. So one tip is to simply go to go to your browser, open up an incognito window, and then go to Google, and then type in your company name. Right, so you're starting from kind of Google and then click from Google to your website. And of course, you can do this on your mobile device as well. And then just notice how fast it loads. So you could see that page was very quick and we're in good shape. Then I would also browse some of the sub pages and just make sure that those are loading, fast as well. So just kind of check it on your phone, on your desktop, and just make sure that you do it in the incognito or private mode so there's no cookies. Now, I know this is not a perfect test, and people probably in comments will say, oh my gosh, this is not a perfect test. But I do think this is an important test. I would also then, do this all the time. Do it at your office, do it at your home, do it when you go to Starbucks, do it when you go to grandma's, do it when you go to grandpa's, do it when you're at a trade show. Just periodically check from different locations, different devices, different Wi-Fi networks, how fast you are, and just become neurotic about that. That's your first and most simple test. Secondarily, I would look at tools. There are tools that'll help you check your website speed. Now, the good thing about the tools is that they exist and most are free. The bad thing about the tools is they give you a lot of data points and they disagree with each other. And the computer nerds will disagree as to which tool is quote unquote the best. So take it all with a grain of salt, and you may have to talk to your resident computer nerd to understand what the tools mean. So let's look at a couple of these tools. So let's look at GTmetrix. So you go to GTmetrix, let's put the domain in. Okay, now while it's cooking, let's check out the other one. So let's check out Web Page Test. And let it kind of get started. And then let's check out the Google tool. So these are 3 free tools. They all have pros and cons. Okay, now let's go back and let's talk about the pros and cons. So you would think, for instance, that the Google PageSpeed Insights is the best tool because it's the Google official tool, but you'd be wrong. A lot of people are very critical of the Google tool, and a lot of the techno nerds that I know basically kind of say that it doesn't actually give you the best data. But, it is Google's official tool. I would definitely check it out. GTmetrix also used to be the standard tool. There's been a lot of disputes and arguments over whether their newer and quote improved quote version is actually new and improved. And then there's Web Page Test. So I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Just use different tools and see what they say. So let's go see. So you can see here on GTmetrix, we're getting a C, and then it goes through and it gives you information on some of the issues. So this is actually not surprising to me. This website is hosted on GoDaddy, and GoDaddy has degraded in terms of its server response time. It's probably the biggest complaint about GoDaddy these days, and a lot of people are migrating off of GoDaddy. So that doesn't surprise me. And then it gives you some data below that point, and you can drill into this data and all sorts of jazz, and again, call your resident computer nerd to understand what this means. And don't freak out if you get a C. Again, we just saw that in terms of user experience, it seems pretty fast. So, whatever. Web page test, this one breaks it down on different areas. You can see here it really doesn't like my security, and it doesn't like the first byte time, which is the speed from the server. And then I get A's and B's on everything else. And again, it gives you a lot of data here. You again probably have to be a computer nerd to be able to understand this, but it's a useful tool. And then you have Google's test, which actually passed pretty well with a 72, and there's some interesting data in there as well. And again, server response time. So looking at this website, you can see that the easiest variable to fix here is probably the hosting variable. That's the biggest complaint. So you want to look at these tests and then look for actionable items that you can easily do. So that's the second issue, is use some of the free tools. Third, I would look at Google Analytics itself. So Google Analytics itself gives us some data on how real users are using your website and the load time here. And the other cool thing is you can break it down by segments, such as mobile, desktop, and tablet, and look at what's going on. So let's look at how you do this. So you're going to log into your Google Analytics account. You're going to go to Behavior, Site Speed Overview, and you can also set up segments. So you can enable, these are default segments, all users, tablet and desktop, mobile traffic. And then you can look at a time horizon. This is last week, it looks like. And then you can see the average page load time, the domain lookup time, the server connection time, server response. So this is actually not too bad. It's telling me we're under 2 seconds for the average page load time. You can also see the different browsers that were used and the average load time. So this is a kind of a good check across a time frame as to how your site is performing in speed. So it's buried there in Google Analytics. Finally, you can click over to Speed Suggestions. This takes a long time to load, but this will also give you some actionable items. Again, you probably need to reach out to your resident WordPress expert, resident hosting expert, etc., to interpret what this data means. So I'm not. Finally, I do have a link to the Speed Suggestions article in Google Support, which will give you some information about what site speed is and how it works. So let's wrap up. So first and foremost, we know that speed matters. We're going to check it for our users, just sort of how users use it. We're going to become neurotic and do it at every Starbucks, McDonald's, airport that we're on. We're going to do it in incognito mode to just kind of check in what I would call man of the street, a woman of the street mode. Second, we're going to use tools like GTmetrix, Web Page Test, and Google Page Insights. That's going to give us some data about how our website is performing. We're going to reach out to our resident WordPress hosting techno nerd expert for to-dos from those more detailed tests. And finally, we're going to look in Google Analytics, where we can get some data not just at a particular moment in time, but we can look backwards and forwards in time, and we can slice and dice it on attributes like phone traffic versus desktop traffic. So at the end of this exercise, you should at least be able to figure out how fast your website is. And in another video, we'll talk about some of the things you can do to improve your website speed. Subscribe to my channel, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching.